There are so many people now who claim to be carnivore, who say that they used to be vegan. But when they say they used to be vegan, what they mean is they used to eat just fruit. They were fruitarians, or they used to eat a raw plant-based diet, or they used to engage in extreme detoxes where they would just look at watermelons if they were hungry. This is not veganism. These extreme diets are not you being vegan just because the foods you ate were plants. And it's so frustrating when people say veganism nearly killed me because for 6 months they only consumed carrot juices or something utterly ridiculous like that. Something that by any rational and common sense standards would obviously be unhealthy, but these people decided to do it because it's all about wellness and conspiratorial contrarianism. And then when that made them sick, they go, "Ooh, veganism is terrible. I'm an ex-vegan now and I only eat red meat." Okay, so let's talk about wellness, because ironically, many aspects of wellness have become a disease impacting people's scientific literacy, critical thinking, rationality, and indeed their ethics and morality. A huge part of the problem is the term wellness itself, because when you hear the term wellness, you think of well-being. So if something is related to wellness, you automatically presume that that thing must be about improving one's physical or mental health. However, while aspects of wellness can be good and positive and indeed even evidence-based, the problem is these evidence-based parts of wellness can inadvertently legitimize the harmful and unsubstantiated aspects of wellness. For example, if you follow a wellness influencer and they're talking about things like meditation or mindfulness or even, let's say, eating fruits and vegetables, although that seems to be less and less common in the wellness community these days, more on that later. But if you follow wellness influencers and they give advice which is positive and is evidence-based, you might then start to believe that everything they're saying is evidence-based and positive. Maybe you practice mindfulness and you start to reap the benefits of doing it, and then the person who maybe led you on this path towards mindfulness starts talking about conspiracy theories and bee-sting therapy and raw milk and raw meat and starts talking about these other aspects. You might start to believe these things more than you would have done normally because you've had those viewpoints legitimized by the actual evidence-based and positive things that you may have learned from this influencer. Is wellness always as dangerous as what I just described? No, of course it's not. But that being said, there is a well-documented phenomenon called the wellness to right-wing pipeline, which is basically about how people get into wellness and then become politically radicalized as a consequence of the overarching messaging which can exist within the wellness communities. So while there is that pipeline, that's not necessarily what I'm so interested in digging into specifically, although there is significant overlap to that idea within what I'll be talking about today. But what I'm interested in exploring in today's video is the wellness to animal abuse pipeline. Because you may have noticed that in recent years, there's been a not so insignificant number of influencers and wellness gurus, which is a term that should be a red flag in itself. You may have noticed that there's a number of these people who have swapped the proverbial green juices and quinoa salads for raw milk, organ meat, and bone marrow, because hey, nothing says mind, body, spirit like exploitation, suffering, and death. However, before we dive deeper into all of that, a lot of what I'll be talking about in today's video certainly does not pass the sniff test. However, the good news for you and I is there's no reason why we can't. And that's all thanks to Wild, who have partnered with me on today's video. Wild is my favorite cruelty-free and vegan deodorant, and I've actually been using it for years now because the scents all smell great and it actually lasts and works. I also like Wild because they use these reusable cases and they use these plastic-free refills, which means that using Wild is good for the planet and good for animals. Now, using these cases is actually super easy because all you do is you wind the bottom bit down, you can then pop it off, you take the old refill off, you put the new refill on, and then you can compost the old refill. Wild also ships worldwide and offers a flexible subscription service, which means that you can get these refills sent straight to your door, hassle-free. Now, personally, my favorite scent is Thunderstorm, but Wild have just launched this scent, which is very aptly named Summer Breeze, which also smells really good and is perfect for the warmer months that we are heading into. On top of all of this, you can actually get 20% off of all Wild products now for a limited time only by clicking the link in my description and using the code ED2025 or by scanning the QR code, which is on the screen now. So a huge thank you to Wild for partnering with me on today's video. And now let's dive a little deeper into the subject of today's video. Now, you might presume that veganism and the wellness community are natural allies. After all, a whole foods plant-based diet has been shown time and time again by the evidence to not only be healthy for us, but to have the potential to prevent chronic diseases. So what's the problem here? Well, the problem is, for many within the wellness space, they're not interested in what the evidence shows. In fact, the evidence is often what is to be feared, because evidence leads to changes in government guidelines. It leads to changes within the medical profession. It leads to changes from health authorities. And within the wellness space, for many, it is less about wellness and more about rejecting all of these different institutions and ideas. For many, wellness is about rejecting what is mainstream because they view what has been normalized and adopted or recommended by health authorities as being what we should fear. The actual notion of wellness is less about following the evidence and what the science shows us, and more about being a contrarian. At its core, the pursuit of wellness for many people is the pursuit of going against what other people are doing, because maybe it makes them feel special. Maybe it makes them feel like they're more intelligent, that they know things that other people don't know. Maybe it's a way of them signifying that they stand out, that they have significance because they're not doing what everyone else is doing. They're not part of the mainstream. They're not falling for the lies and misinformation being propagated by establishments and health authorities and government guidelines. You see, that at its core is what underpins so much of modern wellness. It's not about well-being and health. It's about the sense of self and identity politics and how we perceive our body and our lives and our interactions with the world around us. So it's not actually about following what is truly and genuinely good for us. Another thing is, back in the day, a plant-based diet was probably more acceptable within the wellness space because a plant-based diet was more fringe. But what many did within the wellness space with a plant-based diet is they didn't just follow a normal plant-based diet of cooked foods and a mixture of foods from legumes, nuts, seeds, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. No, people within the wellness space went one step further. They were raw vegans or raw plant-based eaters. They were fruitarians, or they went on extreme detoxes. You see, we sometimes have this idea that veganism and wellness overlaps, but it doesn't really. What overlaps is diet and wellness, but the diet that overlaps with wellness is the fringe diets that exist. And so plant-based diets and wellness have overlapped in the past, but even when they did, it was the more extreme versions of a plant-based diet, the unhealthy versions of a plant-based diet. So even when someone is following a fringe diet within the wellness space, they still want to go that one step further to prove that they're more interested in wellness, that they're more interested in rejecting the conventional wisdom and conventional thinking. When we start to view how this space operates, it very quickly starts to reveal itself as not being the very thing it says that it is. The actual pursuit of health and well-being is a facade that covers up something psychologically a little bit deeper than that. Now, for those of us who are vegan, we will be painfully aware that there is still a view within many people in society that a plant-based diet is still a fringe-esque diet to consume. But within the wellness space, that's not the case. And within the past half a decade or so, there's been the rise of a new type of eating. And this type of eating is even better because it's the most radical, the most extreme, and most importantly, it's the one that goes against health guidelines the most. Of course, I'm referring to the carnivore diet, where people only consume animal products.
Did you know that if you eat 15 burger patties every single day without the burger bun or the vegetables, you could reverse amenorrhea, eczema, psoriasis, cystic acne, chronic bloat, brain fog, and even all PMS symptoms? While you watch me eat 2 pounds worth of ground beef patties, I'm going to tell you about all the lies I found out about after eating meat again. Don't eat meat because it clogs arteries. Eat oatmeal for breakfast and a salad every day because fiber is essential. Don't drink raw milk because of deadly bacteria. Always swap butter for margarine if you don't want to die of a heart attack. Move more and eat less if you want to stay in shape. Eating too much meat will make you gassy and smelly. If you believe in any of these statements, then you've been fooled by the biggest scam of all, the food system. They can only make money off of sick people, not healthy people, and a patient cured is a customer lost.
Now, the irony is that these people like to refer to themselves as free thinkers, which is another red flag term in my book. But then they fall for the most obvious misinformation and disinformation that is currently being disseminated within wellness spaces. The problem is these people are trapped under these heavy layers of cognitive biases and cognitive dissonance, and it is these more hidden psychological behavioral drivers which are truly shaping their worldview, not actual evidence. And what you find is these people will disregard hundreds, even thousands of high-quality studies, but then accept at face value what some random chiropractor on Instagram tells them. There are numerous influencers now on social media filming themselves eating sticks of butter and consuming copious amounts of red meat and drinking a lot of raw milk, even though doing so comes with obvious health risks. But then again, I guess the true enemy of independent thought and free thinking is just basic common sense.
I was craving a quick pick-me-up while walking the streets of New York, so I picked up my favorite energy bar, a stick of butter. There's no feeling quite like biting into cold butter, SPF-free in the city.
Now, one of the biggest drivers in terms of getting people into the modern wellness space has been the rise of anti-establishment thinking. And of course, this has become particularly prominent in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, there were, of course, a few drivers that existed before the pandemic that were bringing people into this space, and these drivers also exist now. And of course, one of the most prominent is Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, and indeed celebrity endorsements in general. Now, Goop has become notorious for peddling pseudoscientific, harmful and unsubstantiated wellness products and concepts. Things like raw milk and also bee-sting therapy. Now, of course, Gwyneth Paltrow is not someone that we should be turning to for health advice. She's not a qualified voice within the health space. And what's scary on top of all of this is that even though Gwyneth is the face, the creator of this Goop empire, when she's asked questions about the evidence of the products that she is selling to people, the ideas that she's selling to people, she can't even answer simple questions.
Squatting when urinating strengthens the pelvic floor muscles, resulting in a flatter stomach and more satisfying life. Is that something that you believe in?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I've never read that before.
You got to subscribe to this website. That is true. That's actually on there.
God. The jade egg is an ancient Chinese practice where women insert the jade egg in their lady parts.
Right.
And to help tone the pelvic floor.
How does it help do that?
I don't know. I need to start my jade egg practice.
You've never been on this website before, have you? What are you doing in that office? So people will... You sell a lot of these?
We sell tons of them.
And if that wasn't bad enough, she also doesn't understand the ethical consequences of what she advocates for either.
It's actually a very ancient remedy for arthritis and inflammation and scar tissue, which is they sting you with a bee. And then if you have a bad scarring or you have inflammation, then apparently the bee sting has all these amazing healing properties. I just didn't think...
Don't bees die when they sting someone?
Oh. I don't know. I'm not a bee practitioner.
There is also a significant amount of cognitive dissonance which can be found within certain sections of the Western wellness space. Because for many within these spaces, they will happily accept certain forms of, let's say, Chinese alternative medicine, especially those which are centered around herbs and plants. But they will also reject other forms of Chinese alternative medicine, particularly those around animals, like, let's say, shark fins or pangolin scales, or bear bile. But why are these rejected? Well, it's to do with our cultural values and our sensibilities. The reason why people don't want to consume shark fins and pangolin scales and bear bile is because culturally it's not acceptable. And from a value perspective, we find it offensive because bear bile farming is grotesque and awful. And skinning animals or cutting their fins off for shark fins, these things are morally reprehensible and of course utterly disgusting, let alone not based in any actual evidence. But the problem is people within the Western wellness spaces will agree with everything I've just said about those examples. But then when it comes to examples of animal exploitation that they find morally permissible and culturally normal, like exploiting dairy cows for raw milk or animals for organs or bees for bee sting therapy, all of a sudden they have this huge amount of cognitive dissonance where they're happy to accept these things because these things don't offend their sensibilities, whereas these other things over here do. And all of a sudden you realize that the whole idea of wellness is just completely ridiculous in so many ways. And what these people arbitrarily pick and choose is exactly that. Arbitrary. And in the same way that we should reject Chinese alternative medicine that especially exploits animals, we should reject Western alternative medicine, which exploits animals as well. And as well as the term wellness being used misleadingly within the wellness space also misleadingly uses other words and phrases like ethical and sustainable and compassionate. Take this interview with Gwyneth where she talks about her daughter Apple and how it's great because her daughter Apple doesn't want to touch anything that's cruel to animals, which is nice because that ethos aligns with the products that they make at Goop. Now that's really funny because Goop currently sells a moisturizer that's made from goat milk, camel milk, and deer antlers, and a face mask that's made from fish skin. Wearing someone else's skin is obviously cruel, let alone weird. But then again, what do I know? Maybe Hannibal Lecter is actually an icon within the wellness community. And come to think of it, Hannibal Lecter would also be a big fan of the carnivore diet, wouldn't he?
I ate his liver.
It's important to mention that in 2018, Goop was sued for false advertising and for making unsubstantiated claims, including about the use of jade eggs, which Goop falsely claimed could balance hormones and fight depression. But the problem is with Goop and with people who peddle bogus wellness products or concepts is that when they're criticized for spreading misinformation and disinformation, that can almost bolster their relationship with those who are engaging with their products and content. Because those who are buying these products or absorbing this information like the idea that it doesn't conform to mainstream guidelines or mainstream wisdom or the scientific consensus. That's appealing to them. So when you have organizations saying, hey, we're going to sue you because this is misinformation, for many within the wellness space, this is signaling to them that, hey, these products must be good because they're being attacked. And how often do we hear this? Oh, these products must work because we're being told not to buy them. Eating animal products must be good, especially raw milk and red meat, because we're being told not to consume these things. And so if anything, when these companies or these influencers are criticized, it can even make their reputation higher within those who are consuming and buying their products or information. And this is this sort of self-perpetuating problem within wellness. The more something is demonized for not being supported by the evidence, the more that those who believe in these products will believe in these products. And raw milk is such a wonderful example of this because raw milk isn't just something that health authorities advise against consuming. It's not red meat where they say, hey, don't consume too much of it, but you can still buy it in a supermarket. Raw milk is actually banned in many states in the US. And that is probably one of the reasons why raw milk has become this big talking point within the wellness community, because it feeds into all of the ideas these people want to believe. Oh, they've banned it. It's not just they say you shouldn't drink too much of it, they've said it should be illegal. And for many people within the wellness space, that makes raw milk the elixir of life. It makes it the ultimate food that you should be consuming, because out of all the foods, it's the one food that's illegal in many states and is regulated against. So who cares if the evidence shows that consumption of dairy is not good for you, raw or pasteurized? Who cares if it causes harm to animals, right? Who cares about any of that? Governments and states are telling us that we shouldn't be legally allowed to consume it. And in my eyes, that is the ultimate evidence that we should all be consuming lots and lots of it. I mean, that's essentially what we're dealing with here. That mindset, that way of thinking about health and nutrition. They tell me I shouldn't, so therefore I definitely should. But this political paranoia, this deeply ingrained fear and anxiety around governments and guidelines and authorities and establishments is so all-consuming that it's actually a form of self-sabotage, because from a wellness perspective, none of these things are good for your mental well-being. And of course, consuming these products are not good for your physical well-being either. I mean, especially in the case of raw milk, where you can literally hospitalize yourself because you've given yourself a completely avoidable foodborne pathogen. But with social media influencers, they're perceived as being relatable and authentic and trustworthy and honest and just speaking their mind. They're like us, unlike celebrities who don't exist within our world. These social media influencers do. They're the people we see on the streets, the people we engage with, not just online, but in the world around us. They feel like they are more like us, and that's sort of the red herring in all of this. But social media influencers are just horrific for so many reasons. But within this particular conversation, they're horrific because they peddle often just utter garbage, just rubbish, junk science, pseudoscience, harmful science. And so all of a sudden you can go on social media and hear anecdotes about how urine therapy cured someone of cancer, or drinking colloidal silver is the most amazing thing you can do for your body, or consuming sticks of butter or drinking raw milk or only consuming red meat will cure you of all ailments. And actually, one of the problems that we as vegans face is that anecdotes are very persuasive, and people can say, I used to be vegan, but it nearly killed me, so now I only eat red meat and I've never been healthier and I feel amazing. And people will believe that because for some reason we just find that more believable than actual evidence. Because the problem is, if you make a reel on Instagram or a TikTok on TikTok and you go, hey, there's this study and right here it says this and this is what it shows, it's really hard to keep people's engagement and interest. But if you go on social media and you use flashy subtitles and graphics and effects and you go, I used to be vegan and it nearly killed me, now I only eat raw meat and it saved my life, all of a sudden that's going to be more attention grabbing to people, which means people engage with it more. And sadly, for some reason, people start to believe it, even though anecdotes are among the weakest forms of scientific evidence that exists. Now, this brings me to Erewhon. If you've not heard of Erewhon before, then I would first like to apologize to you because I have just robbed you of the blissful ignorance that you had mere moments ago. Erewhon is a supermarket where you can spend $50 on vitamin C supplements, $14 for around 700 milliliters of hyper-oxygenated water, and $69 on a nano-formulated immune elixir. Erewhon is the culmination of the true underlying motivations behind much of modern-day wellness. Erewhon rips people off, and in return, it allows wealthy shoppers to flex their social and wealth status. The name Erewhon is taken from a book, but the book is a satire, and within the book, people are imprisoned for being unattractive or suffering from physical ailments and being unwell. Now, you'd think that when a business becomes comparable to a book which is a satire, that might be cause for self-reflection, but the only self-reflection that many of Erewhon's customers are interested in is the one that comes from the mirror. Erewhon also sells raw milk because of course it does, and it also has embraced carnivore diets. Most notably, it released a collaboration smoothie with Paul Saladino. And can we just take a moment to embrace how wonderfully absurd it is that someone who thinks that vegetables are poison and are going to kill you has the word salad in their surname. Now, Paul Saladino used to be a carnivore. Now he's an ex-carnivore who advocates for an animal-based diet. But he's also claimed that people shouldn't be in the state of ketosis. It's actually all very confusing, and I don't think Paul himself knows what he believes in or what foods he should be eating, because he has actually described pickled cucumbers as being animal-based, which I think is just the most perfect summary of the situation.
Pickles are cucumbers. So cucumbers are a fruit, actually. I think they're great. Definitely an animal-based food.
Anyway, let's check out that smoothie.
All right, so we got the raw kefir from Raw Farms, all that good stuff in there. Lucuma powder, that's powdered berry from the Amazon. So we got the organ powder, this is the beef organs, which is this one from Heart and Soil Supplements. Heart, liver, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. Sea salt, bananas and blueberries. Raw honey, that's the good stuff. Whipped maple colostrum coconut cream. So that has the colostrum from Heart and Soil, the Immunomilk, and whipped coconut milk with maple syrup. Ooh, that's good stuff.
It's funny, isn't it, how something called animal-based can contain so many plants within it. But while they might be marketing this product as some kind of uber healthy, primal, ancestral elixir, it's more likely to take you to an emergency room than it is any kind of spiritual awakening or health nirvana. The smoothie literally comes with a health disclaimer, because that's right, this smoothie is so good for you that it might make you seriously ill. Raw Farm, who are the company who provided the raw milk for this smoothie, have been implicated in at least a dozen disease outbreaks and product recalls. Their raw dairy has been found to be contaminated with bird flu, listeria, campylobacter, salmonella. They have even led to the hospitalization of children. But who cares, right? Because Gwyneth Paltrow thinks that raw milk is great.
I drink raw cream in my coffee every morning.
Yeah, here we go. Well, let's look at it this way.
Raw farm dairy.
Oh, and also, did I mention that the girl who likes to eat slabs of butter says that raw milk has never made her sick, so obviously it must be safe.
I've been drinking this every day for the past few months and I've never gotten sick.
This is the level of health and nutrition understanding that we're dealing with here. It's like when people say, oh, well, smoking can't be that bad for you. I knew someone who smoked every day their entire life and they didn't die from lung cancer. The raw milk one fascinates me so much because it is just so crazy and so blindingly obvious. But the problem is people are just so woefully uninformed. I mean, check out these comments from a video promoting raw milk. You are putting people's lives at risk. There is a reason why we banned unpasteurized milk. Unbelievable. People have been drinking raw milk for centuries. Do you think they had everything uber sanitized and pasteurized? Were they dying from raw milk back then? Give me a break. Yes, people were literally dying from the consumption of milk. In fact, milk sanitation, which of course includes pasteurization, is viewed as being one of the main reasons why rates of infant mortality in America dropped so significantly in the early 20th century. That, along with things like antibiotics and vaccines and medicine in general. But hey, I guess we should all be drinking raw milk, right, and avoiding antibiotics and vaccines, because instead we can just drink colloidal silver and sting ourselves with bees. Wellness often revolves around the idea of living naturally and living like our ancestors. You know, the people who died at the age of 30 because they cut themselves on a rock and died from sepsis. And again, I don't really care if people do things that increase the likelihood of them becoming sick. That's not what I'm bothered about here. What I care about is that people are exploiting animals, that animals are suffering and being killed so that people can make themselves feel a little bit more special by not conforming to the most obvious and common sense food safety practices that exist. And let's just talk about vegans for a moment, because there are too many people who say that they're vegan and believe in harmful and unsubstantiated things. And the reason why this is a problem is because there are so many people now who claim to be carnivore, who say that they used to be vegan. But when they say they used to be vegan, what they mean is they used to eat just fruit. They were fruitarians, or they used to eat a raw plant-based diet, or they used to engage in extreme detoxes where they would just look at watermelons if they were hungry. This is not veganism. These extreme diets are not you being vegan just because the foods you ate were plants. Veganism isn't about that. And it's so frustrating when people say veganism nearly killed me because for 6 months they only consumed carrot juices or something utterly ridiculous like that. Something that by any rational and common sense standards would obviously be unhealthy. But these people decided to do it because it's all about wellness and conspiratorial contrarianism. And then when that made them sick, they go, "Ooh, veganism is terrible. I'm an ex-vegan now and I only eat red meat." And this is why it is so important for those of us who are vegan to be guided by the evidence, the science, and by what is substantiated. Now, this might seem like a redundant thing to say, but there are many vegans whose worldview is actually very similar to that of the carnivore, who have the same basic principles and ideas and paranoias and fears about the world and about guidelines and about authorities and about science and nutrition, but they just haven't quite relinquished their veganism yet and gone to eating only animals or more animal products because perhaps they do have an ethical connection to veganism. And so for them, veganism isn't just about diet, it is about animals, but their worldview broadly subscribes to the same worldview that those in the carnivore diet have. This is incredibly dangerous because it depends what your worldview becomes strongest about. And you may have ethics that lead you to veganism in the first place, but if you are so deeply embedded with this paranoia and this worldview that is a part of this right-wing wellness carnivore worldview, you're having this conflict because you're being told by one part of your identity that you shouldn't trust health guidelines and authority figures and the science. And these are the very things that are now substantiating a plant-based diet. And so these people can find themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place where they identify as ethical vegans, but perhaps if they weren't ethical, they too would have followed the same trajectory that so many of these carnivores have who call themselves ex-vegan but never had that ethical connection and were just eating plant-based because it was a fringe thing to do 10 years ago. It's no coincidence that the epicenter of the wellness that I've been speaking about is in the US, where healthcare is privatized, where pharmaceutical companies rip people off, and where there is an opaque system around people's health and well-being. It is only natural to feel exploited as a person who has to live within that system. But what many people don't realize is that the wellness industry, particularly in America, operates with the same principles. It is a commercialized, profit-driven industry which seeks to make money off of people's illness and anxiety and fear and lack of good health. It sells them superficial or dangerous products, or offers them solutions which are not actual solutions, and it rips people off in doing so. The wellness industry does not care about the well-being or health of those who it lures into its web of pseudoscience. It cares about rinsing them for the products that it sells at overinflated prices and which do not truly bring about true health and well-being. And so, in essence, the wellness industry is just another off-branch of the American healthcare system. It is a symptom of the same problem, and it is just a shame that people don't necessarily see it in that way. We live in a world where sensationalism sells, and social media influencers who want to make a name for themselves and get people over to their content will do so by creating crazy, outrageous content, which is controversial and will get people to click and engage and comment and to watch for longer periods of time. The real victims when people start consuming more meat and raw milk and using bee sting therapy or whatever it may be, the real victims are the animals who have no say and no influence in this madness that we have created, but yet again find themselves suffering because of our absurdity, of our irrationality. But anyway, that brings me to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to Wild for partnering with me. And as always, let me know down below what you think in the comments. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the next video.